He said, "Truth or dare?" Then dared me to tell him my secret. I've always believed that some truths feel heavier than others, not because they're inherently unbearable, but because of how long we've carried them in silence. My secret was like that, a weight I learned to tuck away in corners of my chest, pretending it didn't exist, pretending I wasn't suffocating. But the truth has a strange way of clawing its way out. And sometimes, it's not the world that forces it from you. It's a single person, a friend, someone who looks at you like they already know there's more under your skin. For me, that someone was Ryan. Ryan had been in my life for years. We'd met in middle school, bonded over the stupidest things, video games, late-night movies, an unspoken competition of who could make the other laugh harder. We were inseparable, and by the time high school rolled around, people just naturally paired our names together. Where's Ryan? Where's my name? If you saw one, you expected the other. But the thing about closeness is, it cuts both ways. The closer you are, the more dangerous it feels to hide yourself. And yet, the scarier it is to be real. Because if I told him, if I showed him, I wasn't sure if I'd lose him forever. So I kept quiet. And then came the night that changed everything. We were at his house, sprawled out on his bedroom floor. The kind of night that didn't need planning. Just snacks, a couple of sodas, the soft hum of his fan spinning lazily above us. We'd been playing Mario Kart until our thumbs ached, trading insults and laughing until our voices cracked. At some point, the game controllers ended up abandoned between us, and we just lay there, staring up at the ceiling. That was when he said it. Truth or dare? First I laughed. What are we, 12? He turned his head, smirking at me. Come on. Don't be scared. I rolled my eyes. Fine. Truth. And then he hit me with it. Casually, like he was asking what I wanted for dinner. What's your biggest secret? My whole body froze. My heart stopped for half a second. He couldn't have known, right? He couldn't have guessed what that question would stir inside me. To him, it was probably just a joke, something to make me squirm. But to me, it was like he'd opened the exact door I'd spent years barricading. I swallowed, trying to laugh it off. That's a stupid question. Ryan raised an eyebrow, his smirk softening into something else, something curious. So you do have one. My palms were sweating. I could feel every beat of my heart slamming against my ribs. I'd played 1,000 little scenarios in my head over the years. Confessions whispered in the dark, moments where I just blurted it out. But none of them felt like this. None of them had Ryan lying next to me, waiting. I shook my head. Pick something else. He leaned on one elbow, studying me. Nah, that's the dare now. Tell me your secret. He said it with that same teasing tone, but his eyes looked serious. Like he wanted to know. Like he needed to. I wanted to run. I wanted to change the subject. Throw a pillow at him, laugh until the moment passed. But I couldn't. Not with him staring at me like that. Not with every inch of my body screaming that this was it. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. My voice cracked. It's not that simple. Why not? His voice was softer now, almost careful. Because I trailed off, my throat tight. Because once you know, you can't unknow. And if it changes how you see me. He cut me off, sitting up fully. Hey, it won't. The certainty in his voice was almost worse than the fear. Because how could he promise that? He didn't even know what I was about to say. I sat up too, hugging my knees to my chest. My eyes burned. You don't get it. Ryan reached over, resting a hand on my arm. His touch was warm, steadying. Then make me get it. Tell me. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I was so tired of carrying it alone. So tired of the lie that pressed against every smile I gave him, every word I spoke. I took a shaky breath. Ryan. And then the words caught in my throat. It wasn't just the fear of rejection. It was the fear of ruining something beautiful. Because Ryan wasn't just anyone. He was my best friend. My safe place. The one person I couldn't bear to lose. But at the same time, he was the one person I wanted to know me. Really know me. And so, sitting there in the quiet of his room, with his hands still on my arm and his eyes searching mine, I realized that maybe this was my moment. Maybe it was time. The silence stretched. He didn't push. He just waited. And that was somehow worse because it meant the choice was entirely mine. Finally, I whispered, "My secret is, I'm not who you think I am." His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "I mean, I'm not straight." The words tumbled out before I could take them back. My chest constricted, like I'd ripped open a part of myself I'd sworn to keep hidden. The room went so quiet I could hear the fan whirring above us, the faint buzz of a car passing outside. Ryan just stared at me, not angry, not disgusted, just still. I couldn't read him, and that terrified me more than anything. My hands shook as I buried my face in them. "I'm sorry." There it was, the apology I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times. As if loving differently was a crime. As if telling him was a betrayal. For a moment he didn't move, and I was sure I'd ruined everything. Then I felt his hand on my shoulder again. Gentle, firm. "Don't be sorry," he said quietly. I lifted my head, eyes wet, searching his face for something, anything, to hold on to. And what I saw wasn't anger. It wasn't judgment. It was something else. Something I couldn't name yet. Ryan's eyes were locked on mine, steady in a way that unsettled me even more than if he'd laughed or looked away. "You don't have to apologize," he said again, his voice low, almost careful, like he was afraid I might shatter if he pushed too hard. But I couldn't stop shaking. My mind was already racing ahead, what tomorrow would look like, whether he'd still text me, whether sitting beside me at lunch would suddenly feel different to him. I felt exposed, raw, like every defense I'd built over the years had been torn down in a single breath. "You don't understand," I whispered. "You could hate me for this. Or worse, just not look at me the same." Ryan shook his head immediately. "That's not going to happen." But I'd spent so long believing it would. That everyone would. That if I let this truth escape, it would define me in ways I couldn't control. "You don't know that," I said, my voice trembling. He leaned closer, and there was this strange intensity in his eyes. Like he wasn't just hearing me, but listening. Like he wanted every word, every hesitation, every ounce of fear I carried. "Then make me understand," he said softly. I froze. Nobody had ever asked me that before. Nobody had wanted to understand. People didn't ask about secrets like mine. They just made assumptions, threw words around, or pretended it didn't exist. But Ryan wasn't pretending. The air between us was thick, heavy. I felt my pulse pounding in my throat. "I've been hiding this for years," I finally said. "Every time I laughed with you, every time we hung out, there was this voice in the back of my head telling me, if he ever finds out, it's over. He'll leave. He'll hate you." Ryan's brow knit, like the idea genuinely hurt him. "Why would you ever think that about me?" "Because that's what people do." My voice cracked. "Because I've seen it happen. Because I've felt it." He stayed quiet, but his silence didn't feel empty. It felt like he was holding space for me, letting me bleed out what I'd been carrying. I clenched my fists, staring at the carpet. "Do you know how many times I almost told you? Sitting in your car after practice, walking home from school. On those nights we'd stay up until 2 a.m. I wanted to so bad. But every time, I'd picture you looking at me differently. Like I was a stranger. Like I wasn't safe with you anymore. And I couldn't risk it." Ryan's hand squeezed my arm, grounding me. "You've always been safe with me." The certainty in his voice made my chest ache. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. I glanced up, my eyes blurring. "What if you don't feel the same way about me once you let this sink in?" His expression softened. "The only thing I feel right now is that I should have asked sooner. That you shouldn't have had to carry this alone for so long." That broke me a little. My throat burned as tears spilled down my face, and I hated it. I hated being this vulnerable, this exposed. But Ryan didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He just sat there, watching me with an intensity that made it impossible to hide. And then, after a long silence, he asked, "Is this why you've been acting weird sometimes? Like when I joke about girls or when people would, you know?" "Yeah," I admitted, my voice barely audible. I didn't know how to play along without lying. And lying to you always felt like the worst part. He nodded slowly, like pieces were falling into place. So all those times I thought you were mad at me, or distant, it wasn't about me? It was never about you, I said quickly, shaking my head. It was about me being scared. Scared you'd leave if you knew who I really was. Ryan exhaled, like the weight of that truth hit him. I wouldn't leave. Not ever. Something in his voice cracked then. Not out of anger, but out of something almost protective. And for the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark of relief. But relief is dangerous too, because it opened up something else I'd buried even deeper. There was another truth, one I hadn't dared to speak. Not to anyone. And sitting there beside him, with his hand still on my arm and his eyes still searching mine, I felt it rising in my throat. I loved him, not just as a friend, not just as someone I trusted with my secret. I loved him in the way I wasn't supposed to, in the way that made everything harder. And the cruelest part? Saying the first truth felt like stepping off a ledge. Saying this one would feel like falling all the way down. So I bit it back. I held it inside, because I could survive him knowing I was gay. But I wasn't sure I could survive him knowing I loved him. Ryan finally let out a breath and leaned back against the bed frame, still watching me. You're not who I thought you were, huh? My chest tightened. But then he smiled, gentle, teasing, almost the same way he always had. You're braver. The words stunned me. I just stared at him, speechless. Seriously, he continued. You've been carrying this around, hiding it, and you still had the guts to tell me. That's not weak. That's strong as hell. I didn't know what to do with that. Nobody had ever called me brave for being myself, for telling the truth, for surviving the silence. But Ryan looked at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And in that moment, something shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. Because maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. We sat there in silence for a while, the kind that didn't feel awkward. My breathing slowly steadied, my heart rate calming with each minute that passed. Finally, Ryan nudged me lightly with his shoulder. So, truth or dare? I blinked at him, startled. Are you serious right now? He grinned. Yeah, I mean, we can't just stop the game halfway. That's cheating. I let out a shaky laugh, shaking my head. You're ridiculous. But part of me was grateful. Grateful that he didn't let the weight of my confession swallow us whole. Grateful that he wanted to keep things, us, the same. Fine, I said quietly. Dare. Ryan's grin widened. And then, with a mischievous glint in his eyes, he leaned a little closer. I dare you, he said slowly, to stop apologizing for who you are. My breath caught. It wasn't just a dare. It was a promise. A promise that maybe I didn't have to be afraid anymore. His words hit me harder than any dare could have. Stop apologizing for who you are. I stared at him wide-eyed, like he had just rewritten the rules of the game entirely. And in a way, he had. Because for years, my whole existence had been one long apology. Apologies for the glances I held too long, for the crushes I buried, for the smiles I forced when people teased me about girls I wasn't interested in. Apologies for breathing in a way that felt different from everyone else. I didn't even realize I whispered back, I don't know if I can. Ryan tilted his head, watching me with that frustratingly steady patience of his. Then I'll keep daring you until you do. And that nearly undid me. There was something terrifying and comforting about the way he said it, like he'd already decided that he wasn't going anywhere, like he was ready to fight the war I'd been waging against myself. But what scared me more was how much I wanted to believe him, because if I let myself believe, and he changed his mind tomorrow, it would destroy me. So instead, I forced a shaky laugh. You're really taking this game seriously, huh? He grinned. Of course. Truth or dare isn't just a game, man. It's revealing. I rolled my eyes. That sounds like something you just made up to sound deep. Maybe, he smirked, but doesn't mean it's wrong. The easy banter was familiar, grounding. It reminded me that we were still us, even after everything I just confessed. And yet, beneath the surface, everything felt different now. Because for the first time in my life, someone knew. He knew. And the world hadn't ended. We talked for a while after that, slipping between heavy and light like we always did. He asked me questions, not in an interrogating way but curious, gentle. When did you first know? What's it been like? Keeping it to yourself? Does anyone else know? Each answer was like peeling back another layer of myself. Layers I'd kept hidden even from me. I told him about being 12 years old and realizing I felt something different when the other boys talked about their crushes. I told him about the countless times I'd lied, or swallowed my feelings, or laughed at jokes that hurt me more than I'd admit. I told him about the loneliness, the kind that eats at you even when you're surrounded by people. And Ryan just listened.
No interruptions, no judgment.
Just his steady presence beside me, his eyes soft and unwavering. At one point, when I admitted how scared I was of losing him, he shook his head. You couldn't lose me if you tried. The words wrapped around me like a blanket. But even as I let myself lean into that warmth, the other truth, the one I hadn't dared to say, kept pressing against me. I loved him, and now, with every kind word, every touch of reassurance, every look he gave me, it was harder and harder to keep that hidden. Eventually, the night stretched late. The glow of his bedside lamp painted the room in gold, and the fan hummed in the background. We'd run out of things to say, but neither of us moved to end it. We just sat there, the silence thick but not uncomfortable. I thought maybe he'd fall asleep. But then he turned to me, his expression unreadable. Can I ask you something? He said. Yeah, I breathed. He hesitated, his voice quieter now. Do you like anyone? The question slammed into me like a punch to the chest. My throat went dry. He couldn't know. He couldn't possibly know. But the way he asked, it wasn't casual. It wasn't the same tone he used when we used to joke about girls in our class. It was heavier, intentional. My heart pounded. I tried to deflect. That's another secret. He leaned closer. Then tell me, truth or dare? Remember, I swallowed hard. My entire body was a battlefield. Half of me screaming tell him, the other half begging me to shut it down before I ruined everything. If I told him and he didn't feel the same, it would destroy not just tonight, but us. And Ryan meant too much to me.
So elite.
I forced a small smile and shook my head. No one right now. For the first time that night, his expression faltered, just a flicker, like he'd been expecting a different answer, hoping for one. But then it was gone, replaced by his usual smirk. Guess I'll have to keep asking. We laughed, but something lingered in the air, something I didn't know how to name. Eventually, we stretched out on the floor again, lying shoulder to shoulder in the dim light. My body was buzzing, exhaustion mixing with adrenaline. I wanted to close my eyes, but being this close to him, hearing his breathing, feeling the warmth radiating from his skin, made sleep impossible. After a long silence, Ryan spoke again, his voice softer, almost drowsy. You know, I meant what I said. You don't have to apologize anymore. I turned my head to look at him, my chest aching. He was staring at the ceiling, his profile calm, steady. Thanks, I whispered. He smiled faintly. Anytime. We didn't say anything else after that. But as I lay there beside him, my heart aching with everything I still hadn't said, I realized something. For the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. Morning light has a way of making the night before feel distant, almost like a dream. But when I woke up in Ryan's room the next day, nothing felt like a dream. The sunlight streamed in through the half-open blinds, casting faint stripes across the carpet where we'd fallen asleep. My neck ached from the awkward angle of the floor, but it wasn't the discomfort that made my chest tighten. It was the quiet awareness that I'd said it. My secret was out. Ryan knew. I stayed still, eyes half closed, listening. I could hear him breathing beside me, slow and steady. He was still asleep, one arm draped loosely over his chest. The rise and fall of it was almost hypnotic. And in that stillness, I let myself do something I never dared before. I looked at him openly. No pretending, no stealing glances when he wasn't watching. He looked peaceful, vulnerable even. His hair was a mess, his mouth slightly parted, his face softened in sleep. And my chest ached with the truth I still hadn't told, that it wasn't just that I was gay. It was that I loved him. I closed my eyes again quickly, guilt rushing in. Because even though he hadn't pulled away after my confession, even though he'd told me I was safe, I knew there was a line, and I couldn't cross it, not unless I was willing to risk everything. By the time Ryan stirred awake, stretching and groaning like he always did in the mornings, I had plastered a half-smile on my face. I couldn't let him see how much was still eating at me. "Morning," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Morning," I replied softly. For a while, it felt like any other day. We grabbed breakfast from his kitchen, argued over who got the last pancake, teased each other about who looked more like a zombie. And yet, underneath it all, the weight of what I'd told him lingered, a new thread woven into everything. At one point, as we were rinsing dishes, Ryan bumped his shoulder into mine. "Hey," he said casually, "thanks for trusting me." I froze, the dish in my hand slipping slightly. I glanced at him and he was smiling. Not in a teasing way, but in this soft, almost proud way that made my throat tighten. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Thanks for not freaking out." He shrugged, like it was obvious. "You're still you. Why would I freak out about that? It should have been simple. It should have been enough." But my heart was greedy, because while I was grateful he hadn't walked away, some part of me wanted more. Wanted him to see me the way I saw him. Wanted him to feel something he probably never would. And that wanting was dangerous. Later that week, things seemed to settle back into their normal rhythm. We hung out after school, played games, complained about homework. But there was a subtle shift, like Ryan was paying closer attention to me now. Noticing when I grew quiet, asking questions he never used to. One afternoon, we were sitting on the bleachers after practice. The field stretched empty before us. The sky was painted in streaks of orange and pink, the kind of sunset that makes everything feel heavier. Ryan tossed me a water bottle and leaned back, resting on his hands. "You've been different lately," he said. I stiffened. "Different how?" He shrugged. "Lighter, maybe, like you're not carrying a backpack full of bricks anymore." I let out a nervous laugh. "That's oddly specific." He smirked. "You know what I mean." And I did, because he was right. Even though the fear still lingered, even though I hadn't told him everything, there was a part of me that felt freer. Just having someone else know, even just one person, had cracked open the prison I'd built for myself. "Yeah," I admitted quietly. "It does feel lighter." Ryan looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, as if satisfied, and turned his gaze back to the sunset. But my heart was still racing, because in moments like that, in the quiet, in the soft glow of the fading sun, it was too easy to imagine what it would be like if I told him the whole truth. If I said the words I'd buried for years. "It's you. I'm in love with you." But the words stayed locked in my chest, like always. Weeks passed, and though nothing between us outwardly changed, I noticed the small ways Ryan seemed to hold me closer than before. The texts that came more often, the random check-ins, the way he'd sometimes study me when he thought I wasn't looking. One Friday night, we ended up at another one of his sleepovers. Same routine. Snacks, movies, laughter echoing off the walls of his room. And then, when the laughter faded and the movie credits rolled, Ryan turned to me again with that mischievous glint in his eye. "Truth or dare?" I groaned. "Not this again." "Come on," he said, grinning. "You owe me. Last time was a truth. Time for a dare." I sighed, but smiled despite myself. "Fine. Dare." Ryan leaned back, crossing his arms like he was plotting. Then he said, "I dare you to tell me something you're still scared of." My heart stuttered. He always knew how to find the cracks in me. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm scared that, even if people accept me, they'll never really get me. that I'll always feel a little alone. Ryan's grin faded into something softer, almost sad. He reached out and tapped my knee lightly. Then I guess it's my job to make sure you're never alone. The room went quiet after that. Not awkward, not forced, just heavy with meaning. His words sank into me like an anchor, grounding me, but also pulling me deeper into feelings I couldn't escape. And as I lay awake later that night, listening to his breathing from the other side of the room, I realized something with a sharp pang. It wasn't enough anymore, just being his friend. And that terrified me more than anything else. The realization crept in slowly, like water seeping through cracks in the foundation. For years, I had convinced myself that friendship was enough, that I could bury the deeper feelings, smother them with laughter and shared secrets and late-night talks, that I could live on the scraps of closeness without ever asking for more. But lying there in the dark, listening to Ryan breathe, knowing what I knew now, that he accepted me, that he wanted me to feel safe, made it impossible to keep pretending. It wasn't enough. And that terrified me, because wanting more meant risking the only thing I couldn't lose. Over the next few days, I caught myself studying him in ways I hadn't before. The way his smile tilted slightly more on one side, the faint dimple that appeared when he laughed hard enough, the way his hand would brush against mine sometimes when we walked side by side, casual and unthinking, but enough to send a rush of electricity through me. I hated myself for noticing, for wanting, for turning something so precious into something fragile. One afternoon, we were sprawled out on the grass near the park, our backpacks tossed carelessly beside us. The sun was warm, the air filled with the sound of distant kids playing. Ryan had his arms folded behind his head, staring up at the clouds. "You ever think about the future?" he asked suddenly. The question startled me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, like, where we'll be in 10 years. Who we'll be with. What we'll be doing." I swallowed. "Sometimes." He turned his head to look at me, his expression unreadable. "And," I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I don't know. I just hope I'm not alone." Ryan's gaze softened. He didn't say anything right away, just kept looking at me like he wanted to memorize my face. Then he said quietly, "You won't be." My chest tightened. I wanted so badly to believe him, but wanting and believing were two very different things. That night, as I replayed the moment in my head, I realized I couldn't keep holding this inside. It was eating at me. Every time he said something kind, every time he touched me without thinking, every time he looked at me like I mattered, it chipped away at the walls I'd built. And sooner or later, the truth would break through. The only question was, would it destroy us? A week later, the breaking point came. We were in his room again, our usual hangout spot, littered with empty chip bags and soda cans. The game controllers sat forgotten as we talked about nothing and everything. And then, like he had a sixth sense for when my guard was weakest, Ryan asked, "What aren't you telling me?" The question made my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" He shrugged casually, but his eyes were sharp. "I don't know. It just feels like there's still something. Like you've got another secret you're not ready to let out yet." Panic surged through me. He couldn't know. Could he? I forced a laugh. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" His voice was calm, but insistent. I looked away, my hands trembling slightly in my lap. "Not everything has to be a confession, Ryan." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "No, but sometimes it feels like you're holding back with me. And I don't want that. I want all of you, the real you." His words were supposed to comfort me, but instead, they cracked something open. Because what if he meant it? What if he actually wanted to know the truth? My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. The air between us felt heavy, electric. "Ryan," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. He waited, patient, steady, and for a split second I almost said it. I almost let the words fall out. "I love you," but fear clenched its fist around my throat. Instead, I shook my head. "It's nothing, really." Ryan studied me for a long moment, his jaw tightening. And then, finally, he leaned back with a sigh. "Fine. But when you're ready, you'll tell me." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a request. It was a certainty. And that scared me even more. That night, lying awake in my own bed, I couldn't stop replaying the look in his eyes when he said it. He wasn't just curious. He knew. Maybe not the details, maybe not the whole truth, but enough to sense it. And if he already knew, was I just torturing us both by staying silent? I thought about the night he dared me to tell my secret. The way he'd looked at me when I said it, the way he hadn't pulled away, the way he kept pushing me not out of cruelty, but because he wanted me to stop hiding. Maybe this was another dare, unspoken, waiting. The thought both thrilled and terrified me, because if I took it, everything could change. The idea haunted me for days. Maybe Ryan was daring me again, this time without saying the words. Maybe his patience wasn't just kindness, but an invitation. An open door I was too afraid to step through. But fear is stubborn. It doesn't care about logic or possibility. It doesn't care about the warmth in someone's eyes or the promises they make. Fear only knows one thing: how to keep you small. So I kept swallowing the truth. And it was killing me. The turning point came one rainy Saturday night. Ryan and I were stuck in his house, the storm outside rattling the windows and drumming against the roof. The power flickered once, then came back, leaving us in a half-lit room where shadows stretched long across the walls. We sat on the floor with a deck of cards between us, a lazy game of poker abandoned halfway through. He'd just beaten me 3 hands in a row, and I accused him of cheating. He laughed, that easy, careless laugh that always made something in me ache. "Truth or dare?" he said suddenly, tossing the cards aside. I groaned. "Seriously? You're obsessed." He shrugged. "What can I say? It works." I should have said no. I should have laughed it off. But something in the storm outside, the flickering light, the closeness of the moment, it made me reckless. "Fine I mattered." "Truth." Ryan's eyes locked on mine. "What's the thing you're most afraid of telling me?" The breath left my lungs. He had gone straight for the heart. No games, no soft edges. Just the raw center of my fear. I tried to look away, but he leaned closer, his voice low. "Hey, whatever it is, I can handle it." My throat tightened. "You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow too," he said firmly. The silence stretched. The storm outside roared, thunder shaking the walls. My hands trembled where they rested on my knees. And then, maybe because of the storm, maybe because I was so tired of carrying it, I whispered, "It's you." Ryan blinked. "What?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The words slipped free before I could stop them. "You're the secret I've been keeping. You're the reason I was so scared to tell you. Because it's not just that I like guys. It's that I like you." The room went deathly still. Ryan stared at me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought I'd ruined everything. My vision blurred, panic rising fast. "I'm sorry," I blurted out, my voice breaking. "I know it's messed up. I know you don't feel the same." "Stop," Ryan interrupted, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. I froze, my chest heaving. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Why do you keep apologizing for telling the truth? Because it could ruin us?" I whispered. His jaw tightened. "Do I look ruined to you?" I blinked at him, stunned. For a long, unbearable silence, he just looked at me. His gaze flickered across my face, like he was searching for something. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, he said, "You think you're the only one who's been scared?" The words hit me like a thunderclap. "What do you mean?" Ryan swallowed, his voice unsteady now. "I mean, you're not the only one who's been hiding something." My breath caught. The storm outside seemed to fade, every sound drowned out by the pounding of my heart. "Ryan," I whispered. He raked a hand through his hair, letting out a shaky laugh. "God, I didn't plan to do this tonight." He looked at me again, his eyes raw and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "But if we're putting secrets on the table, you're not the only one who's been in love with his best friend." The air left my lungs all at once. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His words hung between us, heavy and impossible, rewriting everything I thought I knew. You, my voice broke. You feel the same? Ryan gave me this half smile, half grimace, like he was terrified but relieved at the same time. Yeah, for a long time, the storm outside raged on, but inside the room, it felt like the world had gone silent. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should laugh, cry, or run. My entire body was trembling with shock and something dangerously close to hope. Ryan shifted closer, his voice barely above a whisper. So, truth or dare? My lips parted. Dare. His eyes searched mine, and then he said softly, I dare you to kiss me. The words sent a shiver through me. I couldn't tell if I was dreaming or awake, if the storm had carried me into some alternate universe where the thing I wanted most was suddenly within reach. But the look in his eyes told me it was real. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to take the dare. My whole body was on fire. I dare you to kiss me. The words kept echoing in my head, louder than the storm outside, louder than the thunder that rattled the windows. For a moment, I couldn't move. My heart hammered against my ribs, my throat felt dry, and every thought I'd been rehearsing for years, every version of rejection, every what-if nightmare, melted into nothing. All that remained was him, Ryan, sitting there in front of me, eyes steady, lips parted, daring me to finally do the thing I'd only ever dreamed of. Are you serious? I whispered. My voice cracked. Ryan gave me this small, nervous smile. Dead serious. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to ask when. I wanted to demand how long he'd been hiding this, just like me. But the words wouldn't come. Because the truth was, none of that mattered right now. What mattered was that he wanted me to kiss him. So I leaned in. Slowly at first, so slowly it hurt. The air between us was thick, heavy, charged with years of unspoken longing. His eyes flickered down to my lips, and that was the final push I needed. When our mouths finally touched, it was clumsy, soft, uncertain. But it was real. It was happening. And it was everything. A shock of warmth shot through me, down to my fingertips, my chest, my knees. Every ounce of fear, every apology I'd ever whispered in the dark, every lonely night I'd spent wishing. Suddenly, it all made sense. It all led here. Ryan kissed me back, tentative at first, then firmer, his hand lifting to cup the back of my neck. The feel of his fingers against my skin made me shiver. I pressed closer, desperate, terrified the moment would vanish if I didn't hold on to it. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathless, he let out a shaky laugh. Well, guess that's one way to play truth or dare. I laughed too, though my eyes stung with tears I couldn't quite hold back. That felt more like a dare and a truth. Ryan grinned, his forehead resting against mine. Yeah, the best kind. For a long time, we just sat there in the storm's glow, our breaths mingling, the sound of rain pounding against the roof. My heart was still racing, but not from fear anymore. From possibility. From the sheer relief of knowing I hadn't been alone in this. I can't believe. I started, then trailed off, my throat thick. He squeezed the back of my neck gently. Believe it. I've wanted this too. My chest ached. For how long? Ryan tilted his head, thinking. Honestly? Longer than I'd like to admit. I didn't say anything because, well, same reasons as you. Didn't want to screw this up. I swallowed hard, staring at him. We're both idiots. Yeah, he said with a laugh, brushing his thumb against my skin. But at least we're idiots together. The words sank into me, warm and steady. For the first time, together didn't just mean best friends. It meant something more, something terrifying, something beautiful. We kissed again, slower this time, deeper. And as I melted into him, I thought about all the years I'd wasted being afraid, about the walls I'd built to keep him out. All along, he'd been standing on the other side, waiting for me to open the door. Eventually, we pulled apart, and Ryan leaned back against the bed frame, tugging me to sit beside him. Our shoulders pressed together, our fingers brushing tentatively until he finally laced his hand with mine. I stared down at our joined hands, my breath catching. So, what does this mean? Ryan was quiet for a moment, then shrugged. It means we stop pretending. It means we figure it out. Together. The simplicity of it stunned me. My mind wanted to complicate it, to spiral into every worst-case scenario. But Ryan didn't seem scared. He looked certain. And maybe that was enough for me too. We sat there for hours, talking and not talking, kissing and laughing, letting the storm outside fade into a steady drizzle. When the power finally flickered again and the lights dimmed, neither of us moved. We were too wrapped up in the newness of it all, the fragile wonder of finally being honest. At one point, Ryan glanced at me, his expression playful but serious beneath it. So, next round, truth or dare? I groaned, resting my head against his shoulder. Are you ever going to let me live without this game? Not a chance, he teased, squeezing my hand. It's kind of our thing now. I smiled into his shirt, my heart full in a way I hadn't thought possible. Fine. Truth. Ryan was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, Do you regret telling me? I lifted my head, meeting his gaze. Not for a second. His smile was the kind that could undo me. Good. Because I don't regret daring you. We kissed again, and this time, it felt less like a dare and more like a promise. A promise that maybe, after years of fear and silence, I could finally stop apologizing. A promise that maybe love, our love, wasn't something to hide anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances, hushed conversations, and the quiet thrill of a secret too big to stay hidden. Ryan and I didn't talk much about what we were in the immediate aftermath. It was too raw, too new, too precious. But something had shifted, undeniably, and neither of us could pretend otherwise. The first time I saw him in the hallway at school, my chest tightened with nerves. Would he treat me the same? Would he pretend nothing happened? But then he caught my eye across the crowded corridor, and the tiniest smile tugged at his lips. A smile just for me. It was enough to steady me. We kept things subtle, hands brushing under the table during study sessions, knees knocking together when no one was looking, late-night texts that bled into the early morning. And yet, every small gesture felt monumental. Every time his hand lingered on my shoulder, every time his voice softened when he said my name, it was like discovering a new language only the two of us spoke. I should have been happy, and I was, but happiness has a way of drawing shadows behind it. Because if we were building something together, that meant we had something to lose. The world we lived in wasn't built to hold us. Not the way we wanted. Not without cracks forming under the weight of whispers and stares. And as much as I wanted to keep this perfect little world we'd carved out in secret, I knew it couldn't last forever. One night, maybe a week after that storm, we sat out on his back porch. The air smelled of cut grass and the faint smoke of someone's barbecue down the street. Ryan's hand brushed against mine, casual but deliberate. He looked at me, his voice low. Do you think we should tell anyone? My stomach lurched. Tell anyone what? You know. He hesitated, searching for the right words. About us. The phrase sent a shiver down my spine. About us. It felt too fragile to put into words, like naming it out loud might shatter it. I don't know, I admitted. My throat felt tight. What if it changes everything? Ryan's jaw worked as he stared out into the night. Maybe it should. The silence stretched between us, filled with cicadas and the faint hum of traffic. I'm not ready, I said finally, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Ryan nodded slowly, though I could see the disappointment flicker across his face. He didn't push me. He never pushed. But I could feel it, the distance that fear carves, the way it builds walls even when you don't mean to. That night, when he kissed me goodbye, I kissed him back like I was apologizing. And maybe I was, because as much as I loved him, and God, I was realizing it was love. I still carried years of silence like a second skin. I didn't know how to shed it overnight. But Ryan was patient. He didn't demand grand gestures or immediate answers. Instead, he gave me space, steady and constant, as though he knew I'd eventually find my way out of the dark. And in the meantime, he reminded me, every glance, every touch, every quiet laugh, that he wasn't going anywhere. Still, the fear lingered. The question loomed. How long could we keep hiding before the world forced us to choose? One afternoon, a couple weeks later, it nearly happened. We were in the library, tucked away in the corner where no one ever bothered to look. Ryan leaned over to explain something in his notebook, his breath warm against my ear. My chest tightened, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in closer. Too close. For a second, I forgot where we were. I forgot everything but him. That's when I heard footsteps. I jerked back just as someone rounded the shelves. A classmate of ours, glancing in our direction with a curious frown. Ryan's hand froze halfway to mine. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. The classmate gave us a long look, then shrugged and walked away. But the damage was done. My pulse was racing, panic flooding through me. Ryan noticed. He always noticed. "Hey!" he whispered once the coast was clear, his voice steady. "It's okay." But I shook my head, my throat too tight to speak. Because to me, it didn't feel okay. It felt like standing on the edge of something I wasn't ready to jump into. That night, when I got home, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over. The kiss, the storm, the porch, the library. The way his eyes held me steady even when I wanted to run. And I realized something. No matter how scared I was, no matter how heavy the silence I'd carried all my life, Ryan was worth the risk. Because for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding. The decision didn't come all at once. It wasn't like I woke up one morning and thought, today's the day I tell the truth. It was slower than that, more fragile, like a door I kept nudging open, inch by inch, until one day I realized there was no going back. The turning point came in the most ordinary way. We were sitting in Ryan's car, parked outside a diner we liked. It was late, the kind of late where the streets felt empty, washed in that orange glow of tired streetlights. We'd been talking about nothing, music, plans for the weekend, how much he hated the taste of black coffee. When he got quiet, really quiet, I glanced over, and he was staring at the steering wheel, his jaw tight. "What is it?" I asked. He exhaled slowly, then turned to me. His eyes looked tired, but not in a way that sleep could fix. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said softly. The words landed like a stone in my stomach. "I'm not saying we have to, announce it to the whole school or anything," he went on, his voice trembling just slightly. "But I don't want to feel like we're pretending. Pretending." That word hit me hard, because it was exactly what I'd been afraid of, that my fear was making what we had feel less real. I looked at him, my mouth dry. "Are you saying you want to come out?" He hesitated, then nodded. "At least to someone, to people who matter. I'm tired of feeling like I have to choose between being with you and being myself." I didn't answer right away. My mind was spinning with worst-case scenarios. People whispering in the hallways, parents finding out, everything falling apart. But then I looked at him again. The way his hands clenched the steering wheel. The way his voice cracked when he said "with you." And I realized something. He wasn't asking me for perfection. He wasn't asking me to stop being afraid overnight. He was asking me to stand with him. And deep down, I wanted to. "Okay," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ryan turned to me, eyes wide. "Okay," I nodded, even though my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my chest. "Okay, we can tell someone." The relief in his face was immediate, like I'd lifted a weight off him just by saying it. He reached across the console, his hand finding mine in the dark, and for the first time I didn't flinch. That night, I knew the secret wouldn't stay ours much longer. The first person we told was, ironically, the one who'd nearly caught us in the library. Her name was Emily. She'd been Ryan's lab partner since freshman year, and I knew she wasn't the type to spread gossip. Still, when the words left Ryan's mouth, "We're together," my stomach twisted so violently I thought I might be sick. Emily blinked once, twice, then her face broke into the warmest smile I'd ever seen. "Finally," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I nearly choked. Finally, she laughed. You two have been making heart eyes at each other since forever. I was starting to think I was imagining it. My face burned, but Ryan laughed with her, the sound full and unguarded. I hadn't heard him laugh like that in weeks, and just like that, something shifted again. The fear didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. Because someone knew, and instead of disaster, it felt like freedom. We didn't go shouting it from the rooftops. We weren't reckless. But little by little, the circle grew. Another friend here, another trusted person there. Every time I braced myself for rejection. Every time I expected the worst. But more often than not, what I found instead was acceptance. And with each person we told, the weight on my chest grew lighter. Of course, not everyone was kind. There were whispers, side glances, a muttered slur in the hallway, once that left my hands trembling for hours. But Ryan was always there. And when the world felt cruel, he reminded me, softly, fiercely, that love was worth it, that we were worth it. One night, months later, we found ourselves back where it all started. In his basement, the circle of the past collapsing into the present. Only this time, there was no storm outside, no shadows hiding us, just us, sitting side by side, the memory of that game still lingering between us. Ryan turned to me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. Do you ever think about that night? I smiled faintly. Every day. Me too. His voice dropped. You know, when I dared you to tell me your secret, I didn't think you'd actually do it. I laughed, the sound shaking with something deeper. Honestly, neither did I. He reached for my hand then, not caring who might have been watching, not caring about anything but us. And for the first time, I didn't care either. Because the secret wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. And it wasn't something to hide. It was something to live. We sat there, fingers intertwined, letting the silence stretch comfortably between us. The basement smelled faintly of old carpet and dust. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except that he was beside me, steady, warm, alive. You know, Ryan said after a long pause, I was terrified too. I didn't want to mess this up. Not you. Not us. I squeezed his hand. I know. I felt the same way. Every single day. He smiled, that half smile that made my chest ache. And yet, here we are. Somehow, we made it. I nodded, tears prickling the corners of my eyes. Yeah, somehow. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. Life had a way of throwing obstacles at us, of testing everything that mattered. But for once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I was hiding in the shadows. I felt whole. And it was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. We spent the evening talking, laughing, and occasionally kissing when the mood, or the daring, struck. But underneath it all, there was a quiet understanding. A bond that had survived years of fear, silence, and uncertainty. A bond that had finally been allowed to breathe. In the weeks that followed, we grew braver, a little at a time, holding hands in public, texting little notes in class when we thought no one was looking, sitting closer on the bus rides home. Every act was a small rebellion, a declaration that we existed and that we mattered. The first time we told our parents was terrifying. Mine had always been supportive, but I couldn't predict the exact moment when their acceptance might falter. Ryan's parents were a different story. But in both cases, the honesty, raw and unflinching, opened doors I didn't think existed. It wasn't always smooth. There were arguments, tense silences, misunderstandings. Moments when the weight of everything we'd carried threatened to crush us. But through it all, Ryan and I learned something invaluable. Honesty isn't just about telling the truth. It's about standing together through it. One evening, long after the storm had passed and the leaves were turning gold in the late afternoon sun, we returned to that old ritual. The porch swing in his backyard, the smell of autumn air and damp grass, the kind of quiet that settles deep in your bones. I still can't believe it, I said softly, resting my head on his shoulder. Believe what? That we're us. After everything. Somehow we made it to this moment. Ryan chuckled, resting his cheek on my hair. I've believed it since the day you told me your secret. I just didn't think you'd ever believe it too. I smiled into the curve of his neck, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest. I'm starting to. We sat there in silence for a long time, not needing words, not needing explanations, just being. And I realized something fundamental. Love isn't just about passion or longing or the rush of excitement. Sometimes, love is quiet, patient, steady. The hand that reaches for yours in the dark. The voice that says, I'm here, always. The promise that even in the storms, you're not alone. Ryan was that love. My love. I thought back to the night he dared me to tell my secret, to the way my heart had thundered in my chest, to the fear that had felt so unbearable. I remembered the relief, the hope, the trembling laughter, and finally, the kiss that changed everything. And I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I would dare it all over again. Because the secret I'd carried for years, the truth I had been too scared to voice, had led me here. To Ryan. To us. And nothing, no fear, no judgment, no storm, could ever take that away. The night sky stretched above us, stars winking into existence, and I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. I felt safe. I felt seen. I felt loved. And as Ryan's hand tightened around mine, I whispered, almost to myself, thank you for everything. He smiled softly, brushing a thumb across the back of my hand. You don't have to thank me. You did the hard part. You dared. And in that moment, I realized that daring wasn't about risk or fear. It was about truth. It was about letting yourself be seen. It was about stepping into the light, even when the darkness had always felt safer. And finally, I was ready.